It is great to have Senator Adam Schiff joining us again. Senator, there's so many places we could start, but I want to start here. Priorities USA poll: 48% of Americans have not heard about the big, beautiful bill and the debate that's taking place. Of those who have, only 8% know about the Medicaid cuts. For all of the discussion happening amongst your colleagues right now, we need to do something, I think, so that the average American knows what's happening. I know people are busy, people are working, housing prices are out of control. I get it. But also to build real opposition here, we need to do something, I think, to make sure the country knows what is even happening there. What can be done?
Well, I hope that poll is an outlier. The ones that I've seen have the recognition of the bill much higher and the negatives about it much higher, but we shouldn't assume anything. We've got to use every mechanism we can to push out the message. We are today offering amendment after amendment to try to put the Republicans on the spot to try to cut out these terrible Medicare cuts that would just result in millions and millions of Americans losing their health care. We're trying to restore SNAP funding, food nutrition assistance for people that is cut out of this bill. We're trying to make them own increasing the deficit and debt by trillions to fund tax cuts for rich people. So we're making the case in every way we can on the Senate floor, off the Senate floor, in interviews, over the airwaves, in our districts. But we're going to keep at it. I think, judging not from that poll, certainly, but from many others that I've seen, that the message is breaking through. But there is still, I think, consistently still a lot of folks who just aren't familiar with this debate or this bill.
There are a number of dishonesties, I believe, being perpetrated here about the bill. My view has always been, let's just be honest about what's being proposed, and then we can honestly judge whether these are things we want or that we don't want. But a couple of the really dishonest things that I wanted to run by you. Number one, the claim that benefits aren't cut by the bill. There are simply new paperwork requirements. But of course, it seems to me that if you load up new requirements, don't communicate them to people, limit the hours during which people can call and ask questions or get help about those requirements, the paperwork essentially becomes a cut, does it not?
It absolutely does. And in fact, Georgia adopted requirements that look a lot like what they're trying to put in this bill. And the result was that so many people lost their healthcare coverage as a result. We don't want that to be a nationwide phenomenon. But well beyond these paperwork requirements, they're just slashing Medicaid. They're slashing reimbursement rates. They're slashing the degree to which states will now have to take up the fiscal responsibility, states that don't have the resources for it.
Right.
So it's just going to mean cutting people off the rolls. It's also going to mean that a lot of hospitals that are on the edge right now are going to end up closing their doors. Others may be able to stay open, but they're going to close down that labor and delivery, or they're going to close down that emergency room. There's just no mistaking. You take hundreds of billions of dollars out of healthcare system, and people, millions of them, are going to lose coverage.
The other part that seems extraordinarily dishonest that I really want people to understand is that, of course, if you slash a bunch of programs, you're going to be able to say, hey, I'm saving X amount of dollars. I'm saving billions. I'm saving tens of billions, of course. But you have to also consider what's on the other side of the ledger. And the analogy I've made is if I come to you and I say, I've got a great way to save money in our monthly budget, we're not buying groceries anymore. We just saved a couple, however much, 1,500 bucks a month in groceries. You would, of course, say to me, right, but David, we've got to eat. So are we now going out to eat? We have to talk about the other side of the ledger. That's missing from these interviews that I see Republicans giving. The totality is that this is a very expensive bill, isn't it?
Oh, it's a very, very expensive bill. And I think you're absolutely right. We've got to point out, okay, you cut Medicaid for people. What does that mean? They're still going to get sick. They're still going to need surgery. They're still going to need medicine. So what it's going to mean is people don't get treated for things that might be treatable. They wait until it's an emergency. They end up in the emergency room. It's a lot more expensive care when they go to the emergency room. We ended up paying for it anyway, and we pay
Yep.
for it either by these emergency procedures that are costly, but also we pay for it in human lives lost, needlessly lost. And you're right, even with all of these supposed cuts, they're still borrowing money from our kids and grandkids to pay for these tax cuts for wealthy people. So the cuts don't cut enough for these wealthy people and corporate tax cuts.
What is the best way for my audience to activate here? Certainly tell people who don't know about this debate that it's happening. But beyond that, some people wrote to me saying they are calling the offices of the senators that are sort of borderline on this, but they're not all constituents of those senators. So they don't know, does it even matter if I call a senator that doesn't represent me? Others are targeting the donors to those key senators. And this has led to some corporations today shutting off comments on all of their social media because they were getting absolutely crushed. What is most effective and useful for my audience to do right now?
There are a handful of key senators who are on the fence about this bill, and they've made statements that are critical of the bill or they've expressed concerns about the bill. The most effective thing is if they hear from their constituents. Now, people who are viewers of yours or listeners of yours who don't live in those states probably know someone who does live in those states. And reaching out to them and asking them to contact their senators, that can be really effective because they are hearing from their own people that way. So that's what I would encourage. If you know someone in North Carolina, well, Tillis is already against the bill, but in Alaska or in Maine or in any of these other swing states, or senators that you would think would, on the natural, support whatever the president wants, but pointing out through their constituents, hey, this is going to cost me my health care, or hey, our hospital is already on a razor's edge. This is going to force it to close. You can't vote for this. That's really, I think, the most effective.
Last thing, and I'll let you go. There have been some ideas of funding for rural hospitals as a sort of make good for the Medicaid cuts, which many of your colleagues have said now that this is a ruse. This is not something that I like the sound of. Is that something that you feel Republicans are committed to, or is there some possibility that through amendments or negotiation, maybe that quid pro quo, for lack of a better term, or trade could be turned into something where we don't get the cuts to begin with?
I think what they're looking for is political cover. They're looking for a fig leaf. So what they want, if they can't exempt the hospitals in their state, the rural hospitals in their state, they want to create a fund, which the president will have discretion over, to send money to their state, to their rural hospitals. But the amounts they're talking about compared to the need for these hospitals are so small, these hospitals are still going to go under. And in fact, the association representing these hospitals has made it clear none of this is going to work. It's a band-aid when you're
Hmm.
just slashing us. So it's political cover, but that's not going to help you if you need medical care.
All right, Senator Adam Schiff, thanks so much for your time today. I know you're busy over there. We're watching this very closely.
Thank you. You take care now.